On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the world's first ever man-made satellite to enter space. This officially marked the beginning of the space race, a period of intense competition between two rising nations, the United States and the Soviet Union. This was part of a larger conflict called the Cold War. The Cold War started shortly after the Second World War. Although they were brief allies, the US and USSR emerged as world superpowers who came to oppose each other as their ideologies clashed. The space race heightened tensions of the Cold War as both countries competed in an arms race. Sputnik 1, launched in 1957, weighed 184 pounds and was the size of a basketball. It orbited the Earth at 18,000 miles per hour for a total of 3 months before falling out of orbit in January 1958. Sputnik was launched into space by the Soviet R-7, an intercontinental ballistic missile designed by Sergei Korolev. The R-7 was based on the V-2 rocket designed by Nazi Germany. After World War II, the US and Soviet Union competed for designs for V-2 technology. Most of the German designers, such as Werner von Braun, went to the United States, although others went to the USSR. The launch of Sputnik 1 shocked the world, especially the United States. Using a simple radio receiver, Sputnik could be heard emitting a beep every second. Americans were suddenly behind the Russians in technological advancements, sparking anxiety across the country as the Cold War intensified. Harder school curriculums were introduced, students were pushed into science and engineering fields, and the government invested more in education. All of this was to regain the technological superiority they had lost to the Soviet Union.
On November 3, 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first animal, Laika, into space on Sputnik 2. Laika was a homeless dog found on the streets of Moscow who was chosen to board Sputnik 2. Unfortunately, she passed away a few hours after the launch due to overheating and stress. Even though the Soviet Union knew of this, the whole world believed that she was in orbit for 6 days before being humanely poisoned. However, her mission was not in vain, as she proved that it was possible for a living creature to be in space. Laika significantly impacted the world by providing crucial data on the effects of space travel on living organisms. The first satellite launched by the United States was Explorer 1, which launched on January 31, 1958. It was a response to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik 1 in 1957. The Explorer 1 measured the radiation environment in Earth's orbit and carried science instruments. Explorer 1 found radiation belts around Earth, which are now called Van Allen belts. This satellite stopped working on May 23, 1958, when its batteries ran out and remained in orbit until March 31, 1970, completing 58,376 orbits. Explorer 1 opened new avenues for space exploration and research, boosted national confidence in the space race, and most importantly, made the first scientific discovery in space by detecting the Van Allen belts. The Explorer 1 also played an important role of paving the establishment of NASA by revealing the need of a civilian space organization in the U.S.
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, was established in response to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik 1 on October 4, 1957, which marked the beginning of the space race. The U.S. Congress was concerned about national security and technological leadership, and they recognized the need for a new civilian space agency built around the already existing National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, which was established in 1915 in order to promote peaceful research in space. Eisenhower also wanted this new space agency to oversee the United States' non-military space program in order to develop a long-term space plan. This led to the drafting of the National Aeronautics and Space Act, which President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed into law on July 29, 1958. NASA officially began operations on October 1, 1958. The establishment of NASA marked a significant shift in the United States' approach to space exploration, transitioning from a primarily military focus to a civilian-led endeavor aimed at peaceful exploration and scientific discovery. On April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, who was born near Moscow, Russia, became the first human to travel into space and orbit the Earth. The Vostok 1 mission was fully automated due to concerns about the effects of weightlessness on humans. At 9:07 a.m. Moscow time, the rocket took off into space, and in 10 minutes, the Vostok spacecraft separated from the launch rocket. Gagarin spent 108 minutes orbiting the Earth and completed one full orbit around Earth, reaching a maximum altitude of approximately 327 kilometers or 203 miles. Gagarin safely landed in Kazakhstan after ejecting from the capsule and parachuting down at about 7 kilometers altitude due to the Vostok spacecraft having no engines to slow down its re-entry into Earth. This historic mission, known as Vostok 1, marked a significant milestone in human space exploration. The mission was a pivotal moment in the space race, showcasing the Soviet Union's advancements in space technology and exploration.
On February 20th, 1962, John Glenn was the third American in space and the first American to orbit the Earth. He was an American Marine Corps aviator, astronaut, businessman, and politician. John Glenn orbited the Earth in his Mercury space capsule Friendship 7. The capsule was launched atop of the Mercury Atlas rocket. While there weren't many complications and problems on the trip there, on the second orbit, Mission Control noticed a sensor issuing a warning that Friendship 7's heat control and landing bag were not secure, putting the mission and Glenn in danger. But fortunately, the heat shield was able to hold up for the rest of the trip, and Glenn made it back to Earth safely.
President John F. Kennedy assumed office on January 20, 1961. He believed in freedom across the whole world and wanted the United States to move forward with new discoveries in science and technology. In 1962, he challenged the nation to land a man on the moon in his famous speech at Rice University in Houston, Texas.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Although he never lived to see humans reach the moon, Kennedy's vision for his presidency highly impacted the future of the United States. Following his assassination in 1963, the visitor complex at Cape Canaveral was renamed Kennedy Space Center in his honor. 2 years after Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space, in 1963 the Soviets launched the first female cosmonaut, Valentina Tereshkova. Chosen out of 400 other candidates due to her experience in skydiving and parachuting, she underwent 18 months of intense training with the Soviet Air Force. At only 26, she orbited the Earth 48 times in Vostok 6 and spent just under 3 days alone in space. Although the Soviet Union used her as propaganda against the United States to gain an edge in the space race, she still paved the way for more women to enter space, inspiring younger generations to chase their dreams and shoot for the stars. Valentina Tereshkova has a crater on the moon named after her, a statue where she landed, and countless other memorials in her honor.
In 1966, two significant milestones in lunar exploration were achieved through successful soft landings on the moon by robotic spacecrafts from the Soviet Union and the United States. The first of the two landings was by the Soviet Union using their spacecraft named Luna 9. Its launch date was January 31st, 1966, and it landed on the moon on February 3rd, 1966. The significance of Luna 9 was that it became the first spacecraft to achieve a soft landing on the moon and transmit images from the lunar surface. With a lot of determination, the second landing was by the United States, using their spacecraft named Surveyor 1. Its launch date was May 30th, 1966, and it landed on the moon on June 2nd, 1966. The significance of Surveyor 1 was that it was the first U.S. spacecraft to make a soft landing on the moon, demonstrating the feasibility of such landings and providing valuable data for future crewed missions.
Countdown at approximately 3 minutes before liftoff. All systems are reported in excellent condition at this time.
Pressurization. Go, Atlas. Go, Centaur. Atlas autopilot. Go. Centaur autopilot. Go. Launch director. Go.
Gases looks good. Doppler readout is nominal. Chamber pressure looks good. Liftoff was at 7:41 Pacific Daylight Time on an azimuth of 102 degrees.
In 1967, the Soviet Union experienced a tragic setback in their space exploration endeavor, resulting in the loss of a cosmonaut's life. The 1967 tragedy was the Soyuz 1 disaster, which came from the Soviet Union and took place on April 24, 1967. The Soyuz 1 mission, piloted by cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov, the spacecraft encountered multiple technical issues shortly after launch, including the failure of one solar panel to deploy, leading to power shortages and control problems. Upon re-entry, the main parachute failed to deploy correctly, and the reserve chute became entangled with the drogue chute, causing the descent module to crash into the ground at high speed. The casualty in this disaster was Vladimir Komarov. The aftermath of this tragedy was that Komarov became the first human to die during a spaceflight. The incident prompted a re-evaluation of the Soyuz program, leading to design improvements and more rigorous testing procedures.
On July 20th, 1969, in Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the first people to land on the moon. While Armstrong was aboard the Apollo 11 with Aldrin, he was the first man to walk on the moon. About 19 minutes later, Aldrin joined him, and they stayed on the moon for 21 hours and 36 minutes before their pilot, Michael Collins, flew them home. The moon landing changed the world by technological advancements like fly-by-wire technology, digital image processing, hazard analysis and critical control points, or the HACCP system, and initiative materials and electronics. It increased our knowledge of the solar system by helping us discover a deeper understanding of the moon and helped us bring back geological samples from the moon. The moon landing also gave inspiration for future space exploration. While the Cold War tensions were no way reduced, American citizens regained confidence that they belonged to the superior nation. This memorable event ended the space race with the Americans winning.